everyone, to Memento Recovery's web series. Today, we're going to be talking about recovery as a promise. With us today is Dirk Eldredge, our Executive Director at Memento Recovery, and Becky Gordon, our Director of Admissions and Outreach at Memento Recovery. So first up, I'm going to shoot some questions over to Dirk. We want to talk about recovery as a promise. What is recovery in terms of how Memento sees it?
Well, I love the question, and I'm glad to be here today. What I say oftentimes, and what Julie's question is really about, is why do we at Memento view recovery as a promise of your future rather than a consequence of your past? And I think it's a super important story to put together in your head, because it certainly doesn't seem that way in early recovery. It certainly doesn't seem like it's a gift at all. In fact, quite the contrary, in the sense that it is viewed as a dark moment in an individual's life, and oftentimes even a punitive consequence of their progressing dis-ease in their lives. But what I hope to articulate today is clarity and intention around the fact that recovery really is a promise of a much better and much brighter future, juxtaposition and as opposed to a consequence of your behavior. Because many people that come to treatment and recovery centers feel very strongly that it's some kind of punitive punishment. And what we hope to do today is to tell you a story about why we can sit together in a circle as addicts and alcoholics and believe that it is not only a gift, but it's something that we've learned to be really grateful for. Meaning, quote unquote, normal people who navigate life in their own way, those of us that have put down chemicals and medications and chosen to live abstinent lifestyles, really get an incredible opportunity to take a look at ourselves and take a look at our lives and kind of redefine who we are, what we're passionate about, and what we get to do on a day-to-day basis in recovery. And the essence is all really boiled down to gratitude and surrender. Like, to hear an alcoholic or a drug addict say they're grateful to be a drug addict doesn't make sense on the surface, but the statement that preceded this narrative indicates that it really is a piece of gratitude that we hold on to and cherish in I think a much more intentional way than people that don't have these types of struggles, because we get a chance to look inside and do our own work and redefine how we show up in space all day, every day, and navigate life with a passion. And to find our passion through recovery is really the essence of what I'm trying to say. And that is that I am truly, and I know Becky as well, is truly grateful to be in recovery and to have the self-awareness to navigate life with a whole lot more gratitude than we did before we chose to live sober lifestyles.
Mm-hmm. And Becky, how do you think our culture talks about recovery now?
The culture of Memento, or the culture in in society at large? I was just speaking with the women this morning about that, and we were talking about coming to terms with our illness, coming to terms with what's wrong. And when somebody has cancer, when somebody has Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, it's not like you can sit there and argue, no, I don't have that. Or no, I don't think I have that, because it's really clear. And society goes, oh, and there's ribbons and they run races for other diseases. But when you have addiction and when you have trauma and when you have those struggles, it's not as accepted yet, but it's happening. You know, the epidemic before COVID is the addiction epidemic, right? The opioid epidemic. And so it's happening. And I think society is shifting to be more understanding of it. And, but also just, you know, fighting to understand our disease, just like you would if you had any of those other, you know, diseases or situations. You would learn the medicine, you would learn how to eat better, you would, you know, some of those diets, some of those diseases are fixed with diet. And so, you know, talking with them is like, that's what you have to figure out and learn how to live with what you got. And with addiction and, you know, the 90-day residential program that we have here at Momenta, it's because it's not this quick fix. It's a way to learn to live again with what you have. So you got to figure out this dis-ease, like Dirk was saying, in your life. And then how are you going to move forward with your tools and your medicine, so to speak? And how are you going to live different? And how are you going to show up? And then being that face of recovery. Again, it's very rare that we're going to leave Momenta and we're going to talk to families and that everybody in some way, shape, or form is touched by addiction. You know, if you talk to your neighbor, if you talk to your family member, if you talk to your friends, in some way, shape, or form, they all understand or know somebody that's been affected by this. So I think society is changing, but it's still hard. It's still not viewed the same as other chronic illnesses.
Yeah, I just like to jump on board with Becky there. I think the stigma that you're asking about, Julie, is going in the right direction. It's getting more and more minimized as awareness increases, like so many things in life. But it's it can't be a secret for starters. And I think in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it was everybody's family secret. You know, we were covering for our alcoholic dad or mom or sister or brother and creating this cloak of darkness around a systemic family that didn't want to talk about the struggle. And today it's much different. I mean, you see on the news, you see in so many social media platforms, the anonymous nature of recovery kind of going away as more and more public figures and just average people talk about it and are more aware of it. And as Becky talked about, accepting it as a progressive brain disease rather than a character flaw. And it's a huge piece that through awareness and through more understanding clinically of how to treat these different disorders, it's becoming clear, I think, to a lot of people that some of our greatest minds, in fact, some of our most creative people are addicts and alcoholics, or they suffer from clinical depression or anxiety. And it's no longer minimized as marginalized people living homelessly, for example, where we have, you know, people in C-suites, people on stage, people in the fields of whatever competition they're endeavoring to engage in that struggle with this. It's, as Becky again said, it's an epidemic that has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but also, I think, taken off of the front stage of awareness that it had before the pandemic. So we're thriving, actually. If you talk to people in recovery, people thrived through the pandemic because of the tools, because of the awareness that we have a way of life that will overcome pretty much any challenge we're faced with if we stick together in community, whether that's on Zoom or in person meetings. We have a set of tools to navigate whatever life throws in our face. And it's, again, a real gift, I think.
Yeah, and what are some of the tools you would say you've noticed have been the most supportive, especially during this time?
I think spirituality, and, you know, to quote the big book, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. Like, you got to pay attention to the words. Essential means must have. And I think, you know, one of the things we say is that we get a daily reprieve based on our spiritual condition. And Spirituality is not religion. It's not an institution or organization. It doesn't have walls. It's a way of life, and it's about your mind, body, and spirit, and about things like meditation. And, you know, Becky happens to be a yogi and a damn good one. But things like yoga and meditation are something you don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to enjoy and to benefit from. But certainly, if I had to focus in on one aspect in answering your question, Julie, I would definitely say a robust and rich spiritual life is an essential part of living in recovery and remaining not just sane but productive and focused in our daily intentions.
And Becky, what do you think, adding on to what Dirk said about spirituality, what are some of the other tools that you've seen our community lean on?
Yeah. Well, with yoga, we pull in the physical aspect. So it's really a dance of body, mind, and spirit. And that's what the program teaches. And so bringing in the physical piece, and then that ties into connection. So I think one of the biggest tools has been connection. I was talking to a young woman the other day who has never been to an AA in-person meeting. She's only been to Zoom. So that tool of connection and just finding people like ourselves and getting through in this epidemic and meetings online, I think it's just amazing that she's been able to accomplish it. And she can't wait to go to in-person meetings. And so I think connection, just staying in touch with everybody, like Dirk commented, our sense of community. Here we thrive to strive together as one. And I think that's with a longer term program, you have more of an ability to build those connections, to build those relationships, to build that foundation, to then go out into life prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another piece would be just this morning, I can't help but reference it. I mean, we're dealing with women that have endured tremendous trauma, and are fighting for their very lives and finding their voices. And at 6:30 this morning, when I walked into the house, most every client here was in the living room dancing to some 80s song that just caused an immense amount of laughter and joy. And I mean, actually teared up because it was like, it was yet another reminder of why we do what we do at Momenta and so many other great places across the country that provide safety for women to heal, but to see the joy in their faces and the laughter just was another affirmation of many that we get every day when we see breakthroughs and the finding of joy, really. I mean, because the $1 million question is always why, why the hell should I do all this work? And if it's not to pursue and capture joy and in gratitude, as we've already talked about through each day, then why the heck would we do it? And these women that have been just through a whole bunch of hell, sitting or standing and dancing in a living room at 6:30 in the morning, spoke volumes to me about why we do what we do here at Momenta.
So how is recovery a promise? And what is a promise?
Well, I think a promise is just a conviction to a set of beliefs that you advocate for within the context of each of your days. Each day is a gift. And the promises that I understand through my work are that if I show up and I become the best version of myself that I can possibly be, of my authentic self, the promise is that I will find joy and that I will find connection. Those of us that understand this disease understand that it's a disease of isolation, and the antidote is community. And the promise is that if we do this together, that we're going to succeed. If we understand the importance of service, for example, we're going to succeed. And these things cannot be accomplished in a silo. They can't be accomplished as an individual person. We have to serve one another. We have to give away what was freely given to us. And the promises simply indicate that if I show up and be the best version of Dirk that I can be on any given day, then the promise of joy and passion and purpose within the context of my life is front and center, rather than something that would otherwise never be achieved.
Is the same for you, Becky? Is that how you see a promise? And do you think it's the same for everyone as they're going through this recovery journey?
I would say the promise is the miracle, right? Like that's what I would tell the ladies. It's the miracle of change. It's a change in perspective. Is it the same? No, because we have a saying in the program, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. You know, the promise to be engaged and try is a promise to self, because nothing changes if nothing changes. You know, that's something I talk about a lot. And so it's like, are you going to try to do everything different? Are you going to try to listen and learn and take suggestion? And then what is if you make that promise to yourself to engage in this, we know, right? I was telling the women today, it's easy for me to talk about because I know the promises have come forth in my life. And even though it's easy to roll off the tongue and talk about how it all works out, it's not easy. And it's not like I came into this process doing cartwheels. You know, I fought it and it was hard, and that's what we do here. And so that is the work, right? It's the work. It's the daily reprieve.
Yeah, nobody, as Becky suggested, comes in here on a winning streak. But whether you're struggling with chemical dependency or clinical depression or anxiety or a personality disorder, I mean, we need to hit the pause button if we can and reevaluate and do the work as Becky suggested. And it's an amazing opportunity, because the fact of the matter is your wildest imagination while you're in your disease and your dysfunction cannot be imagined. And when you clear and become your authentic self through the work, the promises and the possibilities of life open up in ways that people can't even imagine. And it's relationship with self, radical self-forgiveness, and then relationships with others that are usually the first 2 or 3 dominoes to fall in order, because we begin to show up fully present for these relationships with self and others. And it's really profound. You know, they say that when if your struggle happens to be chemical dependency, for example, and you start drinking or using or both when you're 15 years old or 16 years old or 20 years old, and you stop when you're 35 or 40, that your emotional maturity, your spiritual understandings, all of these natural progressions that happen in our lives have ceased and been arrested and in fact paralyzed. So, you know, for me, for example, I started drinking and using at USC. So say I was 19 or 20 and I stopped when I was 38. And I definitely had the emotional maturity at close to 40 years old of that of a teenager. And so the opportunity for growth is just enhanced. And you could say it's catching up, but I would defer to the fact that it's being reborn and being put in a place, maybe for the first time in my life, where I have a real opportunity to understand who I am and what my giftedness is, what my character defects are, and again, have the understanding and humility to know that my emotional maturity that caused me to get numb every day is also the same thing that gives me great freedom, in the fact that not knowing, being able to admit maybe what I don't know is just an opportunity for growth and new understanding rather than something to squelch my self-esteem or my fear. It's a really beautiful opportunity to understand that none of us really know much. And the greatest gift I've ever known in life is learning. Like, I learn stuff every single day, whether it's from a client here at Momenta or one of my daughters or my bride, like whatever. I have a thirst for gaining and garnering and implementing new understanding in my aged life here at 60. It's like, I don't know shit and I'm completely comfortable with it because all I want to do is grow and learn how to love myself and others better.
Would you say that's your recovery promise? That's your own personal? How would you define your recovery?
I see that as synonymous, Julie. I see personal promise and my recovery promise as one. Because without my recovery, I have no promise. I have no life. I have no purpose. I have no foundation. So it's really important that they're one and the same.
What about you, Becky?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what Dirk said. I mean, my promise, had to be in my recovery to put my recovery first, again, to learn to live with this. And then it's a daily promise and it's, it's continually evolving as I grow in my own story. I talk to the women a lot about becoming the warrior of their story and, rewriting that first chapter as we begin this journey. And then the chapters just get bigger and longer. And yeah, keeping that beginner's mind. And then, here at work, we talk a lot about ambition and having an ambition and my promise to my recovery and then keeping that grows my ambition every day for what lies ahead for me on a personal level, on a work level, on a recovery level. So it all ties together.
What would your advice be as community members begin to step back into day-to-day life? How do they keep their recovery promise at the forefront of their minds? And we did talk a little bit about the tools that you would suggest, but if you were speaking to someone and they're just about to step outside of Momenta's doors and start anew, what advice would you offer?
I go to structured practices like prayer, like meditation, like yoga, like a hike. Uh, One thing I learned early on was to roll out of bed and hit your knees as opposed to your feet. Because if I hit my feet, I just start moving and my day, just takes on whatever meaning it's going to have. But through recovery, I understand that it's not about what Dirk's will is. It's more about what God's will is. And if I roll out of bed and hit my knees and say I have a full business day in front of me, I just ask God. And God, by the way, is, as we know, it's defined differently for each of us. So no bias here. I'm just giving you a very specific answer to a great question. And that is to encourage people to pause in the morning and reflect on what their daily intentions are, to meditate on those intentions, to understand them so that we can have as much structure and personal accountability through each day that will allow us to flourish and realize our dreams, but also to reflect with God and just say, what do you have for me today? And how is it that I can be of the highest purpose to you, and to get out of Dirk's will and into something far greater, however it's defined. For me, it's a loving, living God, and I want to make darn sure that every action I take, every intervention I endeavor to have with another human being is leading with love and grace rather than whatever Dirk's selfish agenda is. And to ask for direction in how to best honor something far greater than myself throughout each day.
So it's really kind of going back to that tool of spirituality, whatever that may be for anyone. reflecting and being grateful.
Yeah, and then to set up a system of accountability that, with like we were talking about a minute ago with daily intentions. And then, to understand that we're not gonna have perfect days every day. We're gonna get distracted, or um, our attention is gonna shift to another place. But if you have a promise and a daily intention, it's much easier to kind of gauge how you're showing up to meet those intentions and those promises throughout the course of each day. And then I think most importantly, at the end of the day, and this is the tool, Julie, where we can look back at the end of a given day and say, okay, here's what I intended to do, here's what I promised I would do, and here's what I actually did. So, that can be like a home run or a foul ball. It's every day is not great, but, and this is the key, if we give ourselves a fearless and thorough inventory each and every day on how we would grade our professionalism around meeting our promises and our intentions, not only are we going to be able to structure the next day, we're going to be able to clean up what we missed for this day. And I just think it's a super effective and certainly not correlated with addiction, but it's a design for living that I think not only drug addicts and alcoholics and people that suffer with mental health issues can benefit from, but the entire human race.
Mm-hmm. A rigorous self-audit daily.
Yeah. It's funny because people, those are just words, right? But if you can actually give yourself a grade or whatever vernacular you want to use to describe your daily achievements, but to look inside, because, oh, by the way, that's where the answers lie, not in what we see on the media. This is clearly an inside job, but what people, I'll just speak for myself, what I failed at for the better part of 2 decades was an inability to be honest with myself on how I was showing up and what I was actually getting accomplished and how much time was I actually wasting versus having a set of principles that would allow me to achieve my aspirations, my intentions, my promises. But through recovery and through healing and restoration, that ability to be not just critical of your own behavior, but aware of it and desirous of making it again the best it can be. And that, I think, for each of us could be accomplished with a really kind of drastically real and transparent evaluation of self. How did I show up? How were my interactions? How did I meet my commitments? If so, if not, again, there's tools, there's ways to go back and quickly make an amends. Like if I said something to Julie this morning that was inappropriate and unfair, I'm going to be much more quick to come back to Julie and say, hey, I'm sorry for how I showed up for that conversation this morning. I really stepped on it and I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. And, that kind of, it's simple, but it's not easy. And to develop consistency around holding ourselves accountable for reaching for the stars and dreaming big and accomplishing things in life that frankly never felt possible can all be done with a rigorous self-honesty and awareness around where our shortcomings are, because we all have them. We're all broken and it's absolutely okay. But if we're aware of it and we can quantify it, then we can make it actionable and do something about it.
Recovery as a promise is a promise to yourself first, would you say? And in your community? Yeah, what do you think, Becky?
Yeah, I mean, Becky has, I'm sure, a great answer for that as well, but it's absolutely starts with self. And then, part of the credo as far as how we roll and show up through life is to understand, random acts of kindness, having a servant heart with no agenda, extending grace and love to somebody, whether it's in a parking lot or a church or a beach or, whatever. It's like showing up and looking for ways to get out of self and get into service is a huge piece, because not only are we loving on another human being, we begin to start feeling better about ourselves because we're less selfish and more engaged in giving ourselves away and expecting nothing in return.
Mhm.
Well, and I would say too that here at Momenta, what we offer and why we're a longer program is love and safety as part of, or mainly the goal of our first 30 days is these women come in feeling absolutely terrified and not able to make a promise to themselves on this level. And so we create this safety and love, and then the women do stay longer. We have a woman leaving tomorrow, transitioning, and she stayed an extra month on her own. And we were just talking about this morning. She said, Becky, I'm so scared to leave. I'm so scared to walk out the door because I'm so safe here. And so I talked to her about that safety that she's created within. Dirk just mentioned that it's an inside job. And so, yes, Momenta has provided that at first, and like we provide the love and safety, and then they get to learn to love themselves. They get to learn how do they keep themselves safe, and then they get to go home and they get to incorporate all these tools. And the problem is, right, is that we want it to happen overnight. And so we just talked about patience and we talked about your truth, because what you're going home is, all the work that you've done on the inside, and that the people on the outside might not know as soon as they see you, right? They don't know everything that's happened in your life while you've been here. And so they expect you to be a certain way. They remember you being a certain way, and we do shift and we do change. And so what I told her was to hold that in her heart, knowing that what she's processed and grew and established here is going with her. So Momenta's with her, and we will be on her journey with her, and we'll keep in touch. And I think it helps, but I think it's still a little scary for her to consider herself leaving tomorrow. I mean, it's really sweet to see her cling to the program, also stepping into growth and strength as she is going to leave. So it's cool what we provide them with.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And to know that Momenta is there to help through those next steps and transition to day-to-day life. How do you feel that Momenta sets up women for this promise to themselves, the rigorous daily self-audit? What are some practices that the team puts together so that they have the tools that they need?
Well, the magic lies in our clinical team, and Dennis and Carrie and Kelsey and Stacy and Sherry and Jillian. I mean, we have a small but mighty clinical team, all of which that come to Momenta every day with a different skill set. So we're going to try somatic experiencing. We're going to try equine therapy. We're going to try sculpting, / psychodrama with Stacy Lee, and we're going to do EMDR and DBT. We're utilizing, cutting edge clinical opportunity and acumen, but it's not going to be the same for everybody. And what's beautiful about Momenta is it's intentionally small, and because it's small, because we're small, we get an opportunity clinically to spend a lot more time on individual needs, because equine, for example, is not going to work with everybody, or somatic experiencing or sculpting, but something that we bring forward clinically is going to resonate with each individual, and they're going to carry it with them, and it's going to help restore and heal their lives and their hearts to a point where they know what to do when they struggle and what to do when they get fearful. And that is, again, back to the toolbox. It's just with the 21st century and so many great breakthroughs happening, I'm a big believer in psychodrama. It's a groundbreaking, cutting edge therapeutic modality that is blowing up. And, you know, I've got to credit where credit's due, and that's, you know, on site in Tennessee is not the only game in town, but has really provided not just a safe place to heal, but also nourish the therapeutic world with a new awareness around how important it is to deal with attachment to our systemic families, and to be able to set up your family system in a sculpt with 3 people now that represent Momenta that are really prolific at this provision. The attachment disorders, which have been summarily missed, frankly, by mental health for decades, has not been the case in the last 5 or 10 years with places like Momenta and Onsite and others that understand the importance of attachment and understanding why I might think the way I think because of how I was treated as a child by my mother and or my father. And to be able to bring that back in life as an adult and look at the dysfunction, whether you came from a loving family that was simply dysfunctional or a broken family system, to be able to set it up and understand it and evaluate it with a world-class clinician guiding you through it. As Becky said earlier, you know, I'm not going to do any of that unless I feel safe. And with safety and with world-class clinicians like we have here at Momenta, restoration and healing is popping off all over the place, and you can see it, you can feel it. And these women are finding their voices. They're forgiving their abusive fathers or uncles or brothers, and they're putting it in their past rather than bringing it forward into every interaction that they have. And it's like, it's a privilege to be a small part of this organization, and there are others doing great work because we get to see people find themselves and find their voices and move forward as they leave Momenta, not just with their own voice, but also finding their passion. And I think as important as anything, understanding forgiveness, and that we have to release so many of these dark and dysfunctional relationships have held us back and now set us free.
And Becky, what would you say? How does yoga help build tools to address some of those same issues that Dirk was speaking about?
Yoga is a beautiful tool because it's really about being with yourself in the quiet, and that is a huge skill. And so in my own personal journey, I didn't want to sit with self because of where my life had put me, or where I had put myself in my life. And, you know, what I teach the women is physically the issues are in our tissues, right? So we've got to start moving that energy. We've got to start shifting everything that we've gone through, trauma, big or little, we hold in ourselves on a physical level. And so when we begin to shift that and we can stay in the moment and stay present with breath and stay with self, that's really where on a personal note, I really switched from being bad to good, understanding that I didn't need to be bad. I didn't need to shift from bad to good. I needed to shift from sick to healthy. And so that in that quiet, that realization, really learning how to have relationship with self and being able to sit with self to really see and learn, whoa, what happened to me? Something happened to me. And that's why I don't feel okay. That's why I don't feel safe. And we need to identify those things that happened to us. We need to talk about them and we need to process them. And then, then we begin to sit through the talk therapy. It just complements what we're doing and all the other modalities that Dirk mentioned. It really incorporates a way to flow through the day, tie everything together. and then using that as a tool in your toolbox, everything from breath to movement to just dropping into that place in meditation. We go there all the time, but it takes practice. It's a muscle. So that's what yoga really does, is help them flex that muscle of meditation, of quiet, of healing, of that inner work, just that inner wisdom.
So from what I'm hearing, the Momenta team sets up our clients, our community members who are flowing through recovery with tools to do rigorous self-audit starting at the 90-day program at Momenta, and then how you take that to your next phase of life.
Yeah, the one thing we've missed that I might want to add, Julie, is mindfulness.
Yeah.
John Bruna is a legend, and he happens to live in this valley, and we've been gifted with his leadership in the area of mindfulness. And as we talked a little bit about earlier, sometimes mindfulness can be a bridge to finding God and finding your understanding of God. And mindfulness and spirituality do definitely go in hand in hand, but we've been talking a lot about spirituality, and I didn't want to miss the fact that the staff here practices mindfulness with our clients every single day. And it's not unlike parenting. It's just modeling a mindful lifestyle that is self-aware and hopefully selfless, using mindfulness as a daily practice, as a complement to Becky's yoga or somebody's meditation, is another wonderful tool in that box we keep referring to, but is an essential part of sustainable long-term recovery and to find your passion through being very intentional around mindfulness and practicing those things. And one of those things is what we've already talked about, and that is to give yourself, whether it's in the morning or at night or throughout each hour of each day, checking in with yourself on how you're showing up, whether it's at work or at home, as a husband or a wife or as a clinician. A mindfulness practice is a centering tool that is essential, I think, as essential as spirituality or any other offering that we have. And that is, again, a tool for introspection, a tool for analyzing how we're showing up. Are we bringing some stressors from home into work? Are we bringing some joy from home into work? Like, how are we showing up? And to be aware enough to say, yes, I showed up showing great professionalism this morning. I'm really happy. I hope I can keep it going for the rest of the day. But again, it's through awareness and a practice, just like a medical practice. It's imperfect and it never ends. But to have a mindfulness practice is going to be a discernment and a differentiator for each of us as humans on this earth, to hopefully show up in a much more robust and healthy action.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in the next series, we could go over some of the clinical terms that we discuss around trauma and co-occurring disorders and attachment and mindfulness as specific tools that are utilized at Momenta. But recovery as a promise is a rigorous self-audit that starts with a world-class team that you can find at Momenta or some of our other great partners. And then moving from there to using those tools that are learned into the day-to-day life experience.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much for taking some time today to talk about recovery as a promise. And I hope it's a wonderful day.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks.